Good thing it's...
We're good? All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the City Commission workshop of May 9th, 2023. I call this workshop to order. Scott, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry?
Here.
Commissioner Daniel?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson? Mayor Villa?
Here. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go right into it. We're here to talk about the CRA extension. Are you ready, Joe? Is your computer okay?
Yeah, I can't get it up, but I don't need it for this right now. So we talked about this at the previous work session, and I said we would come back again and have another discussion. And the point of it is to get your direction on moving forward. I don't want to assume that everybody thinks we're going to automatically extend the CRA timeframe. There's some criteria. I sent you out my list of notes that I had back from a year ago, May, maybe May. When I met with Kevin Fallen, I met with Clay Irvin and one of his staff members to talk about it. And there was, a little more than a dozen items that came up on here that were of note. I don't want to say of concern, but of note that we need to consider in moving forward. So I think the most important thing that we need to plan for is if we're going to hire a consultant to update the master plan and update the blight study, and they'll do that in comparisons to what it was back in the 90s when we first did it. But in order to do that, according to what we're hearing from Clay's office, is they're wanting to see more specificity in what kind of projects the city wants to put together. And then there's going to be certain restrictions. Now, I said it before, and he's reiterated that things like community policing to be funded through the CRA will no longer be an approved project. They want to see more things that are substantial in nature, to put a dollar value on with specific dates to start and complete. John actually had a meeting with one of Clay's staff members. I'll have John come up here and give you a brief update on what his conversation was. But if I run down this list of my notes originally, we have the ability to extend the CRA out till 2039. Politically, there may be a majority of the county council that's in support of extending the timeframes of CRAs. They're not necessarily in support of expanding the boundaries, unless there was, there'd have to be a revision in the plan that would justify why you want to extend the boundary or expand the boundary and possibly reduce another area. I think that the City Commission did that when I was in Seminole County. You took a certain area of the CRA out and then you expanded it to incorporate the 1200 Center Street property. Again, we need to update the master plan. They are focused on affordable housing projects in the CRAs. So while we do have a potential affordable housing project occurring potentially at 1200 Center Avenue, I'll try to touch on that maybe at the end of this meeting and get some of your thoughts on that. Community policing, again, that's not something that they would support. Septic to sewer projects is favorable if it ties into the Indian River Lagoon. The Indian River Lagoon is not up here, although the intercoastal does flow into the Indian River Lagoon, although is the lagoon north of Ponce Inlet or south of Ponce Inlet? Do you know?
South.
If it's south of Ponce Inlet, then it really doesn't flow in because then it would just come and go out of the inlet. So there may not be a direct connection there. And at any rate, they're also talking about clawbacks for certain projects that if they're not funded, they'll pull their money back on it. We did talk to them a little bit about quiet zones along the FEC. So that may be a permissible project that they would support. So John, do you have more to add that you can update us on from your conversation with the staff members?
Thank you. There's not a whole lot that I could add to what Mr. Forte has said. Maybe just a nuance or two on the issue of affordable housing. While the special district of the CRA, the state focus is on housing options, especially for low, moderate income, and what a community or CRA would do. The county council may or may not be in support of creating more opportunities for housing. And the example for that was, I was at a county council meeting last month on another matter, and they had a discussion on housing, and the staff, Clay Irvin, actually one of the folks that was up there making the presentation, they had prepared a list of available properties in the county. And I think at that meeting, the staff was directed to just put that on hold or actually pull some of them out. So it may not be the priority that it once was from a county perspective, but I think from the state perspective, it probably still is. The infrastructure-related issues with respect to grants for sewer connections could be permissible. And as Mr. Forte said, clawbacks, declining scale. I think the county council is finding that in its next budget year, it's going to have $10 million for, is it the Sunrail program? So that's the first expenditure of that kind, and that's going to be a recurring expenditure for them. And so they want to find ways not to abandon the CRAs, but probably get on a declining scale and find ways for communities to support the things that are going to be in individual communities. The sound barriers may be permissible, and I think they would be very willing to hear a presentation about that. But again, I don't want to add anything to what Joe has said. They want very specific projects with very specific start and stop times and very specific, as much as you can, cost analysis for spending, income, and expenditures. With respect to the boundaries, if you're going to go through the process of creating a new plan and re-envisioning the CRA or extending its time, that's actually the perfect time to consider changing your boundaries. Because if you change a boundary today, you virtually have to go through the entire process again, recreating what you've already done. So I think we've got a window through 26. That's when ours expires. It can go further than that. The one in Deltona is not ready to expire for another 13 years, so they still have a long way to go. And I think, if I understood correctly, that the county commission, or county council, could, by a supermajority vote of the council, extend a timeline even further. So I think there are more unknowns, but I think the planning is very important if you want to continue to see the work of the CRA done. I do think that it's going to need to be in bolder brushstrokes, and I don't know what that means for the city of Holly Hill. You know, we have sign grants, and we have paving grants, and demolition grants, and we have murals in our grant application this year. And the number of people you talk to and that you actually get in the pipeline, getting those people through the pipeline is one of the most difficult things. And when they come out on the other side, I'm working with a recipient now who actually got the work done, has the new sign up, and I'm trying to gather the information just so the manager can write the check and the qualifications of that grant would be satisfied. I think the lowest hanging fruit and the biggest bang for the buck would be for the city to find some way to exploit what is going on across the street at Pictona. That is bringing literally thousands of people to the city of Holly Hill who otherwise would never have been here, and they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming for a long time. I don't know what it means over there. I don't know that we need more pickleball courts. It seems that everybody's making them, but exploiting that that campus with additional entertainment opportunities or new businesses. And I do think it's going to have to be the face of new businesses that really continues to generate more activity around it. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Forte, let me ask a couple questions. So, just so we're all clear, and to your point, Mr. Cox, I think, in my vision, that with the CRA, one of the most useful tools that we have had is our grant program and the ability to help our business owners. And in a lot of ways, that has made us such a business-friendly city. And I believe businesses have had a better time with our city hall than other city halls, and that has been repeated to me from the business community. So is that not going to be permissible anymore, meaning that we can run these types of grant programs through the CRA anymore?
I believe they will continue to be permissible.
Okay.
I think that's a local jurisdiction decision.
But they want to see projects, they want to see the meat, and then that's the potatoes that we're allowed to do as long as...
When you think about that, we do less than $100,000 a year in local grants.
Yeah.
Compared to the millions that we bring in. It's an insignificant amount of money. And I don't know if it's because of complacency or business owners don't want to reinvest in their properties. I'm not quite sure what it is.
I don't think a lot of people really know the possibilities out there.
Well, that could be debated. We've gone up and down the street and provided information to them directly. Kevin Fall, when he was here, literally walked Ridgewood Avenue from one end to the other and dropped information off.
But for many businesses that have moved here, it has been actually a huge help for them, and in some cases, even a defining factor.
Yeah, there's some. Like I said, it's not a big number. It's not like, we would still continue to do it.
Yeah.
And try to promote it even more, because I do think where it was utilized, it has been successful, and there's definitely visible results
Right.
from it.
Well, it's just like a company that wants to move here just down the street, and we may be able to work with them. At least we have that tool in the toolbox to be able to talk about how the city can help make it a reality, and then it helps the whole business community and throughout the community. So I wanted to be clear on that. The other question that I had was, is the blight study that we would have to do and the consultant, is that already in our budget for this year?
Yeah, we put money in the budget. I forgot how much. I think 50,000.
We have 100,000 in it for this year, but my guess is we're not going to spend that 100. We might spend, if we do this, we might be 50.
There's 100 specifically for the consultant.
Correct.
Okay. And that should cover what we need for a consultant to do a blight study?
Yeah, well, you want to conduct the blight study, and that'll be compared to the previous blight study, and then you want to have them update the master plan. And that's where we're talking about projects. So the last master plan was a little bit more broad, and we really deviated things. They had things in there like streetscapes. Well, we never got around to streetscapes. There were a lot of things in there that we did do and accomplish, but there's some things in there that just didn't get accomplished because I don't think it's feasible, it's not practical. So I think that also has to be updated to make sure that it includes whatever new projects that we think we can get accomplished in this next period.
So as a baseline from this commission, is there anyone objecting to us going down the path of going after the next CRA? All right, so I think we're all on board that we want to move forward, so I think now we need to take the discussion into what type of projects we should ask. Are we going to ask the consultant if these projects will?
Here's how consulting works. This consultant comes to town and he meets with the elected body and he gets a feel for where you think the projects are going to go. And then he takes some of that information and he brings it out into the community through these charrettes, and they have these community work sessions, and he presents some of those ideas and he seeks input back from the community as to whether or not they would support those or if they have any different ideas that they would like to be considered.
Okay.
But I don't want a consultant coming in here and having a blank slate. And
Right.
and really, that direction should come from the 5 commissioners. It shouldn't come from the manager. It should come from the elected body.
Right.
And you should be getting your information from your constituents.
Right.
You know, you should be hearing from them and talking to them and getting their ideas, and then what you think is a good project, you know, you kind of set that consultant on a path to see if that's the direction that we want this master plan to go.
Yep. So at this point, we can talk about some ideas that we all have. I'll kick it off here. A couple of things. I know for a long time we have looked at the motels along US 1, and I know that it's been a concern of law enforcement for many years. And there's been great projects like Mr. Penny's business down there turned into a wonderful business community. I don't think all of them can be that way. Every different place has challenges. And then we look at how small the lots are on some of these places. And so is there enough parking? Could they be torn down, built into an office space or a restaurant? But then you have the water retention restrictions now, and you can't make it work with parking. So there's a lot of challenges to that. And so and over the years, I've talked to Mr. Forte a lot about this. The other problem that we have with that is that a lot of these motels actually make a lot of money, and so the cap rate on these motels are very low, which means they're very expensive to purchase. And so I'm not convinced that it's the way to go, but I definitely, if I could wave a magic wand, I believe the most blight throughout our business community is some of those motels. And so I would like to see something done with them. I don't know what, and I don't know how much money that entails, but that's something I just wanted to throw on the wall as a goal. The other thing that I would like to see in the next CRA is an emphasis on LPGA. LPGA more and more is becoming the gateway to our city with people coming in, and I know we need projects, and I know that we have talked long term about four laning LPGA, and what I would say to that is I would tie in, and I haven't talked to you about this, Mr. Forte, yet, but the canal and stormwater. So I know that in what the county provided to staff talked about stormwater improvements as well. And so maybe that could be tied into, because when we look to 4-lane LPGA, if we go down that path, then the biggest problem or hurdle that we have to get over is that canal, obviously. And so there's going to have to be massive amounts of stormwater changes there. So we may have to get creative. So I'd like that to be in it if there is going to be a CRA, and so that would be included along LPGA. There's also a couple businesses that could maybe, be helped along LPGA as well. So those were just off the top of my head a couple things that I wanted to see. I also wanted to see a continuation of having that tool in the toolbox to be able to provide business grants and to be able to help businesses when they come to our area. I think it's really important for this city. So with that, I'll open it up to anybody else with ideas. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
You?
Motels, I think, is going to end up being everybody's first, because that's kind of, I mean, we've come leaps and bounds in what we've, so far with removing all the, sort of outside displays that were getting out of control. And I think we've done a good job on that. But the problem, like when I was talking to Ms. Forte, is we're going to end, it's like, what do you do if you end up, like you say, with your magic wand, and end up with the motels, and then they take them down, and then we end up with empty parking lots and no tax base, and so it's like, what are we going to do? But it's kind of an animal that we're going to have to figure out. But the first thing I thought about when Joe was talking to me about is we had that talk a few years back, and I had some ideas, and I threw them up there, some pictures about the place I went to, and they had all these little peanut figure type things. And their city was kind of known for the peanut capital of the world and all these peanut statues. And I was trying to throw out some creative ideas for maybe these people to get like a vintage stroller on his property versus having 20 old strollers like the guy at Amish who's got the old. So our city has Pictona, and pickleball is kind of our thing now. If we can figure out things that are pickleball themed, like just one thing I threw out there was like having some of the signs that you see for, park that way, and they have like a pickleball paddle shaped theme or a sign, and just seeing if we can feed off of that in certain areas somehow, just to kind of, so people driving through would know that from one end to the next, it's not just Pictona and pickleball, it's kind of throughout our city that would kind of run that theme through something, I don't know, something to go with. We know that not retail, like we were talking earlier, retail is kind of the brick and mortar retail, so building on empty lots is probably not going to be that, I mean, we've got enough empty buildings to refurbish and kind of fill up. And the other thing I thought about, but Mr. Forsythe said it's kind of small potatoes, is continuing on our murals ideas with some of the, especially some of the buildings that could really use a little spiffing up on the sides. We have a grant for that, and maybe push for that, or something like that. Anyway, that's what I was thinking, so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Curry?
I basically have some of the same thoughts. The motels in Ridgewood Avenue, we really need to seriously look at that corridor. And I'm not, would a project like LPGA widening, would that qualify under our CRA since it's not really our road?
It's in our CRA district.
Yeah, but not the widening. I don't mean the paving of it. That I don't think
Okay.
that can be
Oh, you're
included.
just talking about the stormwater aspect.
Stormwater, and then keep it in there for the businesses along there. It's a gateway.
Okay.
We have a junkyard along there
Yeah.
that we could maybe have some creative ideas of how
Agreed.
to.
Agreed. I just wanted to clarify. And I really think that we need to try to embrace Pictona as far as maybe coming up with some ideas. I know we really need to work on parking for Pictona. I see it when they have their tournaments and it's not adequate. I saw it Saturday when we had a tournament. It wasn't supposed to rain till like 11, but a monsoon came down at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and
Did the cars get flooded?
well, there was one that they kept calling out the owner because it was almost up to the door.
Oh my goodness.
And I had suggested to Mr. Forte today that we put some kind of a warning signs up there. Retention area, park at your own risk or something. Anyway, that's off topic. I just really think that we need to look at that as well. And I don't know what some of that would entail at this point. But I do think that we need to look at those things.
Can I expand upon that?
Sure.
Mr. Forte, what about the lot that is to the south of Shirley Hayman Park there?
Yeah, we talked
I
about
know
that
it's
today.
low-lying.
Park is at Mason Avenue.
I'm sorry, not
Is that
sure.
Holman?
Hallman Park.
So it's actually east of Holman Park along the railroad tracks. And we contacted those owners several months ago, just to anonymously, not that they knew it was coming from the city, but just to inquire if they would have interest in selling the property. And the response they gave back was that they are putting plans together to put warehousing on that property. Don't know if that's true or not, but that was the response that we had gotten back. That property is also very low in the wetlands, certainly in the floodplain. There'll be a lot of challenges to putting parking there. Not that it's not possible, but it would certainly have its share of challenges if we're going to put additional parking there.
So, and that's the reason I bring it up is because I know that at least prior, the county was interested in environmental and since it's such a low-lying area, if it's going to be developed, it would have to be built up, it would have to go through a lot of different things. If we could actually save a lot of it and then the front part have parking and maybe a pocket park, some kind of new thing, it may be an idea that we look at future-wise and include in the CRA, but I remember they were talking about conservation, so I don't know if there's
That wouldn't count as conservation land.
even if we did like half of it,
I don't think it's big enough to be considered
is
conservation
it not?
land.
Okay.
Yeah, conservation land's got to fit into acreage.
All right, just throwing out ideas, so,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. And possibly like some of the properties over here, I know Laura's boutique, she had passed away recently, and so I don't know what they're doing with that, but maybe purchasing some of that up to try to get some smaller chain hotels interested, like a Holiday Inn Express or, something like that to accommodate Pictona. And I just think that might be the road to go. It's going to be twofold. It's going to help us clean up Ridgewood, like I know we all want to do, and we have wanted to do, and we're doing. So those are just some of my thoughts.
When, I was gonna say, when you said about the Holiday Inn Express, I had said a long time ago about the Florida Healthcare Facility, would have been nice if they
Yeah.
talk about that, because, I thought, even though we're not on a highway corner like some of the big hotels, a little small in-between type motel, not motel, hotel, like that would be great for our city, but we have some of these storage unit, whatever, but.
Yep. Vice Mayor.
When I first started thinking about it, first thing that came to my mind was the quiet zones, because Joe's already talked to the county about it. And then LPGA came right to my mind. And then I really started thinking, what's the purpose of the CRA? To remove the blight. And I think we would all agree that one of the biggest blights we have is the motels.
Yes.
And so yesterday I reached out to the chief, and you guys got an email today with a spreadsheet. I asked them, hey, is there any way to show the calls that go to these motels? And I don't really think they're motels. A motel was something that you drove from New York and you spent the night on your way to Miami. These are places people are living. They're apartments. And so Chief Miller put together a spreadsheet for us, and I was so busy at work, I didn't get a chance to digest it all. I'm the numbers guy. But I started looking at it real quick. I'm like, because I look out my front window, and there's 712 Ridgewood is right across the street from me. The police are there all the time. And when you look at the spreadsheet, if you have a chance to look at it, they're at a lot of these motels more than once a week. And it's mind-boggling how much they're going there. And when you look at the clientele that are living in these motels, a lot of them, I had to call the police last week because someone was evicted from 712 Ridgewood and set up a camp behind my office. Was living back there. And when you look at it, okay, that's terrible. But then you look at the ancillary effect that the people that live in those motels, if you drive down State and 3rd or Daytona and 8th, and one of the biggest complaints I get are drug deals. It's the drug deal that happens on the side of the road that fast. Cops can't be everywhere all the time. And if the citizen calls it in, it's too late, it's gone, it's happened. But I believe that a lot of that drug activity is coming, the buyers are the people that are living in these motels, and the drug dealers aren't going to the motels because they know they'll get caught and boxed in and caught by our law enforcement officers, so they meet them on these side streets. And so I think that should be our number one focus. And then, okay, so how's it going to hurt us? we're going to tear all these buildings down, and we're going to have no tax base. So just using 712 Ridgewood Avenue, property appraiser has that place assessed, fair market value at $252,000.
Oh, my gosh.
We pay $4,500 in taxes annually. The city's portion is $1,500 annually. Let's just take the whole tax value, $4,500, and just use it as an example, so they're all different. I didn't analyze all the data. But if we take the 13 motels that are on the spreadsheet, and if the entire tax bill is $4,500, that's less than $60,000 less revenue if all those motels were eliminated. So it's not like the end of the world and I'm not saying eminent domain, I'm saying go in and negotiate. Offer them a fair market value for their property. But Bill Arthur told me years ago, the definition of blight is if the property is more valuable without the building on it. And if you eliminate the building, you're going to eliminate the people living in the building. You're going to eliminate a lot of that ancillary drug activity on the side streets. And I think that's going to be the greatest impact that we can do for this area.
And to build upon that, though, Vice Mayor, is not only, you got to look at it, we're not losing that taxable value. I believe that taxable value for the businesses around it is actually going to go up, especially with time.
And you may add additional parking. Some of these businesses are pinched for parking. Maybe Mr. Danio, Commissioner Danio, perfect example. He had to buy the barbershop so he could get people to park at it when DOT took away all of our on-street parking. So I just try to think of the worst-case scenario, and I'm the numbers guy, and I'm sorry I'm not as prepared as I should be, but it's an example. It's attainable. And if we have, I know we've talked about it, but we've never really done anything about it because we've had all these other focuses, and we have done a lot of good things with the CRA over the last 20 years.
JP, can I ask you, a lot of those guys are making a lot of money on those things when you say, because they're like apartment type. Are they going to be like the 8th Street guy, kind of, sticking it to the city because they got us kind of?
It's all negotiable. I mean,
Yeah,
it's all negotiable. I mean, the value is whatever the buyer's willing to pay for it.
Yeah, but their value might be what they're thinking, because they're turning this over year after year after year.
No, I get it. I mean, there's how much are you making? How much are you reporting to the IRS? How much are you reporting to the bed tax? All these things. So I know there's.
I agree.
I understand there's businesses that have 2 sets of books. And in cash businesses, it's very easy to have a couple sets of books. I don't know what things are, but I know everything is for sale for the right price.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we go in and offer them 10 times the value of it, but if it's assessed at $252, it's probably, if you assessed it on the cash flow basis, it's probably worth more than that. So maybe it's worth $400,000. Maybe some of these owners are getting older and are ready to sell. Maybe their kids don't want to take it for the next generation. I don't know. But I think when you look at what can we do and what have we done and how much better, you get 100 times more impact by eliminating one of these motels than to painting 5 more murals on buildings in town. Because the murals are going on the good buildings.
Yes.
So, and the people that apply for the grants and the signs and all these, they're the best buildings. The worst buildings don't want to spend another dime on their property. And so if we eliminate that from the US 1 corridor, I think that would be the biggest bang. So I would say motels, LPGAs, and quiet zones. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
I just
it's a
had thought,
workshop.
I just had, one of the books I read not too long ago was about the Airbnb things. Man, it'd be nice to see about putting, or kind of transitioning some of these into something that would qualify for a.
It would be nice if someone could buy
an
into,
Airbnb or something, yeah.
I wouldn't recommend my worst enemy to spend a night in one of these
Oh,
places.
I agree.
No.
I was so embarrassed when we had the art show a couple years on City Hall.
Yeah.
I talked to one of the artists. Where are you staying? Oh, I'm staying down at this place here. But I was afraid to get under the covers, he said. I was like, oh my God, what does that say?
Yeah,
And so,
Well, and to go off of that, like with,
Closer to the mic.
I'm sorry, like with Pictona, we've had NBA stars here, we've had NFL stars here because of the Major League Pickleball. We've had numerous people over there, and where do they stay? They certainly don't stay in Holly Hill.
Right.
So I think just the appearance of our city would benefit from that being placed top priority for the CRA. I agree.
I agree too, and to expand upon it, and I'm going to play devil's advocate. I completely agree with you. Look, we've identified the problem. I think we can all agree on that. The other thing I want to add too before I go there is that this CRA has been a very well-managed CRA. Down south, there's been some that completely were ran absolutely wrong, and you can see the impact that the CRA has made in our city by just driving down US 1 and seeing the beautiful trees, seeing the landscape, seeing even the power lines going down and all of these projects that have taken place. So it's been an amazing CRA, and now we're left with like, okay, what else do we have to do? Well, what was left out of the CRA over the last 30 years, even though it was an idea that kept coming up, was we could never really purchase those motels. But another thing that we can look to do too is, because it will surprise you the amount of money these people are asking for these motels. A couple of them are for sale right now, and I've looked at them for investors, and they want absolute top dollar. And it's probably a lot like what you said. Maybe they have a lot of cash that's coming in as well that isn't necessarily on the books. But what we could maybe look to do too is with the CRA, and I don't know if the county would be for this, is to incentivize more people like with your location down there, that to help them. We don't necessarily need to take on the burden of purchasing it, but we could come up with programs to entice other entrepreneurs to come in to create businesses or to create something better, or maybe we identify a place where there's a really great operator that can come in and do something better at a higher standard. So that's maybe something we could look into as well. So that way, I have a deep-seated reservation that I believe government should be less, and that we shouldn't make the market. We should the market should make the market. You know, and so where I hesitate is coming in strong and just we're making the market here. But the other side of the coin is, as I sit here directly as mayor, is we've identified the problem. Now we just need the solution. Because I agree with you. I think that it brings the wrong, I don't want to say type of people, but it brings crime. It
The wrong
brings other
element.
activities that we are trying to get away from, and is the definition of blight in my eyes.
and I agree with you, the market should set the market, but I believe that the CRA is there to do things that the market won't, to jumpstart the market. And I've looked at several of the other motels similar to my unit. Most of them won't work. Most of them, the structures are too small. What was unique about our place was there was
Separate.
There was two together. There was two rooms together with a wall between. So they tore the wall down, and now you have 12 separate buildings that were 24 units. And then, if you could find the proper place, now you got St. John's stormwater management, all those things that I don't think you could build our complex today. It couldn't be done today because there's no retention there.
Yeah,
So,
good point.
but I think we're all saying the same thing. We just don't know how to get there.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So, Ms. Forte, I don't know if you need more clarification or direction.
No.
But what I'm hearing is that we do contract with a consultant and start that process.
One of the things I was, not to interrupt, but when John was saying about having a timed start and a start time and an end time. Can we actually commit to an end time the way things seem to prolong?
We have to have an end time. The CRA's got to end, you have to have a
No,
project.
no, I didn't mean that. I mean, when you start something, well, we could start it this day, but the way things are, can you actually,
If we're not showing progress by a certain date, that's where they have the clawback.
okay,
condition.
progress is, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I said, yeah.
So, the only thing I would add in addition to what you've all talked about, somebody had mentioned is the salvage yard on LPGA and the possibilities of relocating them. It's something that we're going to need to look at to see if it's possible within the city, outside the city, what the cost would be. But, again, we all know the motels are the biggest problem. They've been cleaned up compared to what they were 30 years ago, but they still remain a problem. They still have the same issues that they've had for a long time. But because they are on substandard lots, if you buy a motel and you tear it down, you're going to have a grassy area there that's going to have to be maintained unless you can buy them where they're two together, which there's very few except a couple at the south end of the city. You're going to exchange it for vacant land unless you put in public parking. In order to put in public parking, you have to have people that have to park to want to go somewhere. Again, these lots are so small, you're not going to get a lot of parking on them. So we can head the direction of eliminating the blight and putting in these, I don't even want to call them pocket parks, but they will require more city attention and maintenance to keep them grassed and greened and whatever have you. So we can certainly head down that road, and we can start looking at that even now. But just keep in mind, look at what we've had. When I was here the last time, I actually did shut down some motels and some trailer parks. And then some were removed in my absence, and you still have 3rd Street and 6th Street that have been vacant now for over 10 years. So it got rid of a problem, but now you have people saying, well, vacant land, undevelopable, who wants to build there? So we've got to do something to overcome that as well. I think we have enough here to kind of get started. I think we should do away with some of the less important things that we have been doing and focusing on the bigger change that somebody drives down the road and they notice what's been happening. Something's got to disappear. The blight's got to go away.
Would some of these motels be in a position that the code violations, or do they
You
face
don't
a lot
have
of
enough
code
code
violations?
violation where you're going to condemn them. The
No,
only way you're
but-
going to do that through code is that they're in such bad shape that you condemn the buildings and you have them torn down.
Well, I don't know what the situation is from, maybe Brian would know about some of the motels that would give us better leverage because of a number of code violations.
You don't have code violations to the extent that it's going to cause condemnation.
No, but it doesn't have to be condemnation, but it would be where they're out of compliance or like some of these lien reductions that we've done.
The only thing you can do, what you're alluding to, is you get code violations that they don't repair, that generates a lien on the property, that accumulates to a point where the city would foreclose on it. And foreclosing on the property doesn't mean the motel goes away, it just means somebody else buys it and they turn it back into a motel. Because that's what happened at 128 Ridgewood.
Unless the city were to buy it.
Unless the city.
That's what I'm saying, it would put us in a better position because
You
if
would
they had,
foreclose on it, and then you can become a bidder on it, and then you could bid against anybody else. And then if you.
well, even if it didn't foreclose, if we're talking about making an offer that would be above, if we had some leverage to say, well, you've got.
Can't use code enforcement
Yeah.
as a leverage for the city to buy it.
Yeah, let's slow our roll on that. I think, I know what you're saying, but,
Trying to beat around
but
that
we
bush.
shouldn't be targeting any property whatsoever for any reason, so I want to say no to that, so. No.
Maybe incentive to clean them up, but
We've code enforced.
I was
and
going
we
to say,
continue
that's
to
been
code
tried
enforce
for
them.
years.
But what they do is they bring it up to the minimum that they have to do to bring it back into compliance, and the code violation goes
So
away.
I really think we have no choice but to look at purchasing the properties.
You're going to overpay to eliminate the blight. That's your choice.
Which is fine. If that's the direction that the commission wants to go, we can do that. You know, we've overpaid, you overpaid for the market. Put a lot of money into the market, you sold it. It's a productive piece of property today. You've oversold for 6th Street. You oversold for 3rd Street. You know, we oversold for 8th and Ridgewood, you know? We're the government. We're going to overpay for something.
Now-
And you're going to get even less in return.
While we're talking about motels, I didn't ask the chief about this. Maple Leaf, I haven't heard much about Maple Leaf lately. I know it's gotten a lot better, but
Well, the principal that was involved at the Maple Leaf is deceased, who had most of the problems at the time. But a couple of years ago, prior to COVID, we did a very intensive code enforcement on that property, and they've brought it up to compliance. I don't hear much about it either, so either some of their clientele has changed, they're not falling out of code compliance, so it's,
well, my thought was if it were for sale, and if we say that we need a hotel
That would be the
in our
best
area,
option.
that was a hotel.
Well, it was a
at the time.
Holiday Inn, right?
Would be a great place to,
let me just put you in perspective on the discussion of a hotel. We've talked to the hoteliers. They are not interested, and they've advised us that nobody would be interested in building a hotel on Ridgewood Avenue because it's not on a main thoroughfare like an interstate, and it's not along the beach on A1A. So they, you know, it's nice to think that Pictona needs a place for people to stay, but a tournament once a month is not going to sustain a hotel.
Okay, I get it.
So we've talked to them. I've talked to Bob.
Rand. No, the hotel motel
The
guy.
hotel motel guy.
Bob Davis.
Bob Davis, thank you. And he said the hoteliers are not going to build, and it's not
I've
just Holly Hill.
spoke to commercial realtors as well, and that is the case. And it's actually no offense to us.
No, it's not Holly
It's not
Hill.
even the motels,
It's
it's just
anywhere.
the fact that they're building next to big things
Yeah.
to do like the beach and whatnot.
Now, do I think somebody can buy some of these smaller motels and clean them up and make them accommodations for people coming to pickleball? Absolutely. You know, somebody can buy the one right next door and call it the Pickleball Inn.
Yeah.
Decorate it in pickleball fashion and turn it into something that's productive and a true motel where people come, they spend a couple days or a week, and they leave.
Right.
Right.
With
Right.
the pickleball shaped sign.
Could be anything.
Not like the ones now, because it's just
No.
month to month to month to month.
Right, right. And unfortunately, we can't do anything about that.
Yeah. All right, well, I know we're going to have several of these discussions, and just for any of the public listening at home, there will be a lot of public input into this whole process, and so, and all of us, all of your commissioners, and myself as your mayor is always accessible and willing to listen, especially if you have ideas. So, yes. go
I would
ahead.
like to ask the property appraiser why he doesn't assess these hotels at a more equitable
Yeah, that's a
value that
good
they pay
question.
more than $1,500 a year in taxes.
That's a great
Well,
question.
the property appraiser sends the business owner a way to evaluate,
Yep.
and
Cash
you're
flow.
not required to fill it out. It asks you for your cash in, your expenses and your revenue. You're not required to fill it out, but they say this will help us give a better estimate of the true market value of properties in your area.
And I think he should go the other way, and he should over-assess them and let them go to the Value Adjustment Board and justify why it's too high.
Yeah,
Right,
Because
then
I
they
don't
have to
think one
prove why.
motel has ever gone to the Value Adjustment Board.
right.
And I think maybe it's time they should.
Yeah, no, I was surprised at how little taxes they pay.
I didn't know how little, especially with how much they're posting their businesses for, well over $1 million, and if it's assessed for 200,000, that's a little off.
Yeah, that's showing this cash flow.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right, so I believe you have your direction, Mr. Forte, unless you have further questions.
No, I don't think so.
But you did have 10 minutes to talk about.
We do have 10 minutes left, and one thing that initially I thought of is when we were talking about the CRA, to look to include historic road, Daytona Avenue, for homeowners to be able to access certain funds. I know Daytona has that on beachside, but I moved away from that in my mind for several reasons. But one thing that came up in my mind was the church back here.
That's in the CRA.
And it's currently, right, in the CRA. So I don't know if you have any news on that, if that's...
No, I'm waiting for them to come back with the appraisal on it. Of course, we had the folks at Pictona look at the dorms to see if they would accommodate any needs for the youth that come into town or referees that come into town for places to stay. But, it can't be a giveaway for the city. The city has to make market value on it. I looked into the opportunity of the Historic Society moving into the church, which would be a wonderful, the oldest church in the city, housing the Historic Society would be wonderful. But there's work to be done. And who's going to do that work? We can buy it. They could move in and use the sanctuary area, but there's a lot more rooms in that church. I had the chance to go through it a couple weeks ago. And it needs a lot of work in order to be functional. Who's going to pay for that? Are we going to pay for it, or is the Historic Society going to raise money to do it? They're going to be here for a long time to raise that kind of money. One thought is to move the Historic Society and the Chamber over there and then free up the building across the street and either put dorms there for pickleball or other businesses that are related to pickleball on that property. So I'm waiting to get the appraised value back before we can decide if it's something that we're really interested in purchasing. And even with the appraised value, because the church is going to be disbanding, if that's the right word, they have to do something with the monies. And typically, they will donate those monies to other nonprofits in the area. I would like to, if the city's going to buy it, I would like to almost restrict them to Holly Hill nonprofits, or they would give it to other like churches of their denomination. So the first thing we have to do is wait to see what that appraised value comes back, and then if the commission wants to, we'll enter into negotiations with them. But once we buy it, the maintenance begins. There's expenses, there's utility costs that are already in place, there's property maintenance, there's building maintenance. I was given their monthly expense of what it would cost, even without the church there, what they're paying so far, and we need to take that into consideration because that's going to be an outward cost from the moment we close on the property.
Okay.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to discuss?
No, I do want to mention that, and there's really no time to get into it tonight. I've met twice with folks over at Fountainhead about their desire to expand the property. They do own parcel 1. They're looking to put what they call the Pace Building on there. We also have been talking with Kenny from Beneficial. If you remember, he was doing the affordable housing project. So he's back in the mix on that only because the county is going to be receiving funds for housing that Kenny his project would fit into that mold. So I've already put the county on notice that we're interested in that. But there's going to need to be modifications to the PUD agreement. There's going to need to be modifications to the incentive agreement. And I think before we get too far down the road, I'd like to have a work session with the commission to get your position on where that's going to begin and end, because the options have been expired on parcel 3. And without parcel 3, there's no entitlement to the funds if parcel 4 is sold. If the affordable housing folks decide they want to buy parcel 3, are they buying it just for the sake of being able to get Jason to have those funds, or are they going to incorporate it into their project? So there's a lot of questions that are still going to come up, and even more so. But I think we're looking at what I thought, and Brian was with me at these meetings, what I thought was going to be an initial quick discussion about a small, still a large major modification, but on a small scale, amendment to incorporate the Pace Building onto parcel 1 is now going to expand into the other parcels 3 and 4, which will have an impact on the incentive agreement. So I don't see it as being as clean cut as what we initially started out to be. And again, on that project, I mentioned to Jason and Mike, the clock is ticking. You know, in order for them to get any taxable money, construction has to be completed by December of '25. So that's only a year and a half away to complete construction in order to recoup tax money. Now, jobs incentive money might be a little different. That depends on what happens if parcel 4 sells and whether or not they would be entitled to those funds. And again, that's based on whether or not he purchases parcel 3, and right now the option on parcel 3 has been lost. So you can see this matrix that's occurring, and I think I'd like to have a workshop to inform you of what you may have forgotten over the years that this has been in place, and what changes may be coming down the road.
Yeah, I agree. All right, before we end this workshop, any further business from anyone? No? All right, it is 4 minutes till, so we will now adjourn the workshop